Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, there are a lot of new faces around here. Not really faces, but just new subscribers here. So if you're new here, say hello in the comment section. I am a little bit behind, like a couple of videos behind in replying to people in the comment section, but don't you worry, I will get to you later on tonight. I'm going to sit down and do that, respond to all of you because I normally do. So without further ado, let's move on with the rest of the video. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about Dustin Byfuglien. And just as my previous video, because I saw that a couple of you really liked it, there are going to be time codes in the description of this video going through, I guess, like the talking points that I'm going to be talking about in this video. And it's going to be an evolving discussion, not necessarily fixed around Dustin Byfuglien, but fixed around Dustin Byfuglien. Stick around and find out what I'm talking about with that. Now, before we move any further, we need to discuss whether or not Dustin Byfuglien's even coming back next season. But Dustin Byfuglien, like I said, does lead into a larger conversation that I want to have about the Maple Leafs Powerplay here. But Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet, only Dustin Byfuglien knows if he'll play again or not. Byfuglien hasn't said if he'll be back or not. And I believe Elliot when he says that only Dustin Byfuglien knows, because he seems like he's a pretty private guy. I mean, he didn't even really tell Winnipeg what was going on last summer at all. They were even kind of blindsided by this. But the reason why I think that Dustin Byfuglien is just done in the NHL and that he's not coming back at all, I mean, we just need to take a look at his contract here. There is no way that Dustin Byfuglien, if he had plans to play hockey in the near future, would have just gotten himself suspended, not shown up to training camp, and just walked away from $14 million or so, because he's not going to get anywhere close to that on the open market. If he goes on the open market, he might get like a 1 year, $2 million deal, a 1 year, $3 million deal, if so. So in my mind, he's just done. He doesn't care about the money. He's just done because he could have easily been placed on long-term injury reserve. He could have given the Jets a bigger heads up this summer, and they could have gone out and gotten a replacement for him, because even they were shocked by this. So this is the reason why I think that Dustin Byfuglien is just done. And if we come on over to the Winnipeg Jets cap-friendly page here, we're not going to find any remnants of Dustin Byfuglien anywhere here. They've basically just gotten themselves out of the $7.6 million cap hit when the contract was terminated. And for those of you that are wondering if the Winnipeg Jets could re-sign Dustin Byfuglien or not, I'm not sure where the specific rule is there, but I will use a comparison with a compliance buyout. Let's say the Winnipeg Jets were to trade Dustin Byfuglien to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then the Maple Leafs were to use a compliance buyout on Dustin Byfuglien. Not only could the Maple Leafs not re-sign Dustin Byfuglien in this hypothetical fictional scenario, but the Winnipeg Jets could also not re-sign Dustin Byfuglien. That was deemed cap circumvention back in the 12-13 season when compliance buyouts were first awarded to the teams back then. So if that doesn't fly, I can't imagine the Jets being able to re-sign Byfuglien after the contract was mutually terminated. So, Steven, if you're sitting here telling us that Dustin Byfuglien's never going to be playing hockey again, why did you put him in the thumbnail? Why is the title of the video? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of this video? Well, Dustin Byfuglien is interesting because I want to go over the skills or the traits that he would bring to the Toronto Maple Leafs. What are Dustin Byfuglien's strengths? But if we come on over to HockeyDB, we're going to see that Dustin Byfuglien's been a prolific offensive defenseman. He's been a very big part of the Winnipeg Powerplay, and even before that in Atlanta and Chicago. He's a decent defensive defenseman. He really lays the body and is a big boy at 6'5", 260 pounds. He has some unique skill sets that the Toronto Maple Leafs are kind of missing. Obviously, the size component there, but also on the power play. Dustin Byfuglien at this point, I mean, his health is kind of unknown, but if we were to assume that he declined a little bit from what he did last year to 31 points in 42 games, still a decent offensive threat, probably not the greatest defensively, not someone that you'd want to be hard matching minutes against, but someone that you could definitely throw on your second or third pairing and shelter him a little bit and put him on the power play to utilize that big booming shot of his. Because if we take a look at how the Maple Leafs used to set up on the power play, they used to set up with Mitch Marner across from Austin Matthews, John Tavares in front of the net, Tyson Barrie at the point, and William Nylander, kind of that high guy in the slot. And it was very frustrating earlier on in the season to see this setup because it seemed like the power play only had a couple of options here. A Tyson Barrie point shot that would get blocked or deflected from the point, which was absolutely infuriating. They would somehow cycle the puck down low and Tavares would bang it in, or William Nylander would whistle one wide of the net, or Austin Matthews wouldn't have enough time and space to really get his shot off because players were targeting him on that side. And Mitch Marner wasn't too much of a threat at that cycle. He's a great passing option down low, but he doesn't have the same quality shot. He doesn't have a good enough shot to play in that location to make Austin Matthews even more dangerous. So what we saw the Maple Leafs do maybe like 4 or 5 games or so before the shutdown was they moved to this style of power play with Tyson Barrie and Mitch Marner flip-flopping. And this still allowed Mitch Marner to cycle the puck, and it moved Tyson Barrie in a little bit closer to the net so that maybe we can make his shot a little bit more effective, right? Because this is a guy that was known for being a power play specialist. He was known for scoring power play goals. He's known for being a little bit of a rover. I mean, if you think back to the first couple of goals that he scored this season, the first one against Arizona and then the second one against his old team at Colorado, they came from almost the top of the circle or the low circle, almost right in front of the net almost. This guy is a rover. But I'm not suggesting that the Maple Leafs retain Tyson Barrie this offseason just for this purpose. No, I think that we can all agree that we're moving on from him as a player. But who do we put there now in this sense? And that's where I'm kind of getting this idea from Dustin Byfuglien. I get why people would want to acquire him. That's where I would see the most value in Dustin Byfuglien. Just park him there and let him rip bombs from the circle there and make Austin Matthews a more effective threat. Because if defenders have to worry about Dustin Byfuglien rifling a bomb there, then they're not going to be so on top of Austin Matthews, or there's not going to be double coverage there. So if Tyson Barrie's not coming back and Dustin Byfuglien's not an option here, well, what are they going to do? Well, that's where I'm kind of hoping that you guys can kind of come into the fold here. Who would you like to see the Maple Leafs acquire to play on that spot on the power play? Would it be a forward? Would it be a defenseman? Is it via trade? Is it on the open market or not? Leave your suggestions down in the comment section down below, because I'm going to go over one right now that Andrew Pillock Hockey and I talked about in a video on his channel. And that, of course, is PK Subban. Now, Subban is under contract with the Devils, and for the Maple Leafs to acquire him, the Devils would have to retain 50% on him, so his $9 million cap hit would be 4.5 for the Maple Leafs, and even then, I think that is too expensive for him, so I don't know how realistic the move is, but it's just an option. It's just a talking point, right? PK Subban does fit that description of a defenseman that could play on that other side of the circle from Austin Matthews and has a bomb of a shot still. But if the Devils were to use a compliance buyout on PK Subban, if they're awarded them, it's not a foregone conclusion whether or not teams are getting compliance buyouts, but I'm under the impression that the NHL has to, because it's going to be better for player salaries, because teams will obviously have more money to spend, but also for just the teams themselves. I mean, you can't screw all of these teams that are so close to the salary cap here. And if the Devils were to use a compliance buyout on PK Subban, I could see him signing a 1 or 2 year deal for about $3 or $3.5 million or so, maybe $4 million on the highest end. And at that point, you can't tell me that PK's not worth that much money. I mean, Justin Holl is making $2 million. Ron Hainsey signed a 1 year, $3.5 million deal. And if we're talking about acquiring PK Subban, I think it would be good to compare him to Tyson Barrie, because people are going to be looking at those two players and saying, Steven, why would we need another offensive-minded defenseman who's not going to give us those shutdown minutes? Well, if we're looking at Tyson Barrie here, because it's important to contextualize the numbers here, it's going to say that he's been playing 21 minutes and 53 seconds a night this year with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but where have those minutes come, right? Because if we're looking at his zone starts here, for his entire career, he has been heavily favored in the offensive zone, and the season where he produced most of the value that we're seeing on this chart came from the previous season with the Colorado Avalanche, when those splits were at their highest, basically. And with the Maple Leafs potentially having Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren on their blue line next season, I don't see how there's room for a defenseman who requires that heavy sheltering. But if we take a look at PK Subban here, he's playing 22 minutes and 7 seconds a night for the New Jersey Devils, and we contextualize the numbers that we saw earlier in the video with his zone starts. He's actually been used in more of a defensive role, and at this point in PK's career, I don't really think that it makes sense to use him in that role. But if we're going to see, especially earlier on in his career, he was pretty much always that player. But if we see his last year in Nashville here, he was kind of used a little bit more in an offensive role than he was a defensive role. And if we come back over to the advanced stats here, PK Subban in the 18-19 season, not too bad. And those splits on the zone starts for that season in Nashville still aren't as extreme as Tyson Barrie was this season here in Toronto. So they're not the same type of player at all. We need to dismiss that completely. But when you're talking about PK, you got to have a conversation about his attitude and his personality and everything like that. But he would not be the main piece here in Toronto. I guess I'm kind of straying away from the main topic of this video, and that's the Maple Leafs need to do something about their power play. And Dustin Byfuglien could have helped them out there, but I don't think that he's going to be an option for them this season. And I pointed this out in a video a very long time ago. I will link it atop the screen, but I do not recommend watching it because, or go ahead and watch it if you want to, but I mean, it was just a long time ago, and I think that my videos are a lot better now than what they were previously. Well, what are some in-house options that the Maple Leafs could use to fill that spot on the power play here? Well, we can't just clone Austin Matthews. If we could clone Austin Matthews, we could solve a lot of the problems that the teams has been having. But William Nylander has kind of emerged as not being a perimeter player anymore. He's among the league leaders in terms of goals scored in front of the net, and so is John Tavares. I mean, John Tavares has been that elite tip-in guy, that $11 million tip-in guy ever since he got here. He's been an amazing net front presence for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and to have both of them on the same power play kind of seems a little bit redundant, but William Nylander, I think, has more to offer. I think that he has more to offer, and that's where fans get a little bit frustrated with him. I think that William Nylander could be the solution for the Maple Leafs' power play, and we could see him play across from Austin Matthews on the Maple Leafs' #1 unit on the power play for years to come. I think that he has a better shot than a lot of people want to give him credit for, and he needs to start using it more. On the power play, and shooting from certain places on the ice is something that you could definitely practice. They could definitely practice it, and if they had more time in the offseason, they could definitely get William Nylander up to speed and maybe utilize him on that spot on the power play to make Austin Matthews more dangerous. But if we're looking at just the raw numbers here in terms of power play stats this season, we're going to notice a couple of things. One, direct your attention to the time on ice here, because Austin Matthews, relative to a couple of these other players, like Nathan MacKinnon's played almost 60 more minutes on the power play this season. David Pasternak's played almost 40 more. Leon Draisaitl's played almost 50 more. Mika Zibanejad is just a freak. So is Evander Kane. Alex Ovechkin playing almost 100 more minutes on the power play than Austin Matthews and just having one more goal. And if you didn't believe me, here's the proof of that. They are 24th in terms of shorthanded opportunities, and their power play is better than all of the guys below them. So in conclusion, this video was kind of about how the Maple Leafs need to be a little bit more creative on their power play and how they were kind of moving towards making that solution, and how Dustin Byfuglien kind of reignited that idea for me anyway. So make sure to leave me a like on this video if you did like it. Subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, take care. I will speak to you again very shortly.